All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the StepZen stream. We have a really exciting stream today. We have guests with us from our Hacktoberfest repos. Lucia and I did a Hacktoberfest stream a couple weeks ago talking about what we were going to be doing. And we decided now that we're getting close to the end of October, we wanted to invite people who have already contributed to the repo to come on and tell their story and talk about what they've done and also a little bit of who they are. And we have three people with us right now. We have Anita, Pete, and Rebecca. So thank you all for being here. Why don't you each take a second to introduce yourself and say kind of who you are, what you do, how you found this, how you found StepZen's Hacktoberfest repo at all, and then like kind of what you've done on it. And why don't we start with Pete? You can go ahead and go first. And you're gonna want to unmute yourself.
Hi, sorry, I thought I did. Yeah. Hi, I'm Pete. I'm based out of Connecticut. I got introduced.
I spent the first 18 years of my life there. So.
Right on. Very cool. Yeah. So we can get to that later. But StepZen, I got to via Anthony plugging on my friend Alex of Front End Horses Discord channel. So I got to it through that, and I contributed to the Nuxt and the I think it was the SpaceX repos, and just kind of looking through the labeled issues and kind of low-hanging fruit, anything that I could help out with. So I in my day job I do like React, TypeScript, front end stuff a lot. So there was some tickets that sort of related to that I was able to leverage my skill set for.
Yeah, I appreciate
you're the only one. You're the one who's hit both of our repos, actually. So we really appreciate that. And it sounds like you already are like a professional working developer. So I'd be curious, like, what is the motivation for you to do Hacktoberfest?
I would be remiss to save the swag if I didn't mention the swag. So the swag is always fun, but then also just like finding out new tech. So I wasn't quite aware of your service. So it was really cool to see just like the tooling and the existing projects that you already had, something that I wouldn't have had a chance to if I just kind of just rabbit hole down on my professional life. So it's kind of why I choose to help out.
Awesome. We'd love to hear your feedback on the tooling and your thoughts on it in general.
Sure. Right now, I mean, I don't want to take up too much of other people's time, but I found it very easy to use. The documentation was pretty straightforward. And the boilerplate that had to be set up for the respective projects that I contributed to was pretty straightforward. So there was no real gotchas there. I had the benefit of kind of working in these tech stack already, so that can't probably be overstated, but I did find the documentation that did exist to be very helpful.
Awesome. That's great to hear. Good to know it's fairly easy to get set up. So Lucia and I particularly spend a lot of time on and want to make sure that these samples are approachable and make sense for someone to come into who doesn't know anything at all about StepZen. So that's the goal. And it's good to know that we're hitting that mark. And we'll have more time to share more nitty gritties as we go on, but let's get some other introductions here. Let's have Anita. Why don't you let us know who you are and what you do? Anita, you can go ahead, Anita. Can you hear me? Hello?
Sorry, was that me?
Yeah.
You guys are cutting out a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
My internet's a little bit slow over here, but I'll
all good.
Try and introduce and see how it goes. Okay, awesome. So hi everyone, my name is Anita. I am living in Cape Town, South Africa. And I was also introduced to this. I was introduced to Hacktoberfest and then introduced to StepZen through the Front End Horse Discord server. And I didn't know what Hacktoberfest was until October started. And when I heard about it, I thought, okay, that's cool. Someone's giving out free stuff for something, so let me go investigate. And you guys were like the introduction, like I know Alex had put forth your video on YouTube when you were introducing Hacktoberfest as like, if you have no idea what it is and you want to get involved, this is what you should watch. And you two were, Anthony and Lucia were very welcoming in their projects and explained everything so thoroughly. I was like, okay, well then I can definitely just hop on, because it seems like, it's more of an educational kind of thing that you're trying to provide. So I was like, perfect for me. I'm gonna try it, and then I did.
That's awesome. That makes me so happy to hear. We really appreciate that. And then, what is your experience just like with development in general? Like, are you like a boot camp student, or like how did you first get into like coding?
No worries.
I think we're getting a little bit of lag. I was just curious what your experience with dev is. Yeah.
So I graduated from university with computer science, but I didn't pick up a developer job after university. I went to go study animation, and then came back to South Africa and was like, okay, I really want to get a job in development, but front end development. But I didn't have any work experience, and I don't have any experience working on a project with a team. So, that kind of Git workflow that you would get if you worked at a company, I'd never had it before, and I didn't know where else I was going to get it from. So I thought, okay, this is teaching me something that is going to be useful for when I get my first front end job or get a first job at a company. I can tell them I've already tried this kind of workflow with other programmers before. Yeah.
That's awesome. But I was the same way when I started participating in Hacktoberfest. I had contributed to my own repos on GitHub, but I had to get used to the workflow of contributing to those of others, and it was a good opportunity to hop in there and get that experience.
Yeah, very cool. And then we'll get a little more into like kind of what you specifically did as we go on. But let's go to Rebecca. Let us know who you are and what you do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca. I am in the Atlanta area. I am actually an organic chemist by trade, and I'm morphing into a front-end developer. I've been working with React. I've got a personal project going on, this fitness training app that I've been working on, along with some tutorials and coursework therein when I've needed it. And I actually found out about Hacktoberfest through Virtual Coffee, which I am a member of. And specifically, I found the StepZen projects repo through a Virtual Coffee post where there were links to repos with open source. And I found StepZen samples. And I was just as a whole looking for repos or issues that I could do well in a reasonable amount of time. And I don't have any experience with GraphQL, but I found one of the styling issues for the homepage for the SpaceX, the React project, and worked on that. And I actually went on to, I'm working on one of the docs issues for the queries. And I think that's a great way to learn more about GraphQL. So at first I wasn't going to do Hacktoberfest. I hadn't had any experience with open source, but my fiance, who's also a software engineer, as well as some people in Virtual Coffee, encouraged me to do it. And it's been a really great experience. I've been able to look at code that was written by someone other than myself, because I have my own GitHub repos and have a familiarity with that workflow, but taking that extra step to work with someone else's code and making sure that I'm really following the GitHub workflow, and I've learned a lot through that.
Nice. Yeah, I know Lucia is a really big fan of Virtual Coffee.
Yes.
I think that was where she kind of came up. So happy to hear that that was a good window for you as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, does anyone want to kind of speak a little more about like their particular issue that they worked on and kind of like So actually, I want to point out something that you said, Rebecca, that I know is something that I think me and Lucia both thought a lot about, which is not just having like a bunch of issues related to like GraphQL or StepZen in general, that having it be more of like a holistic thing about the whole project. 'Cause I know we included many issues for things like styling and things like accessibility and things that were just front end focused and didn't necessarily focus on like the kind of GraphQL layer. So it's good to know that we kind of had a wide enough spread of issues that anyone was able to kind of find something that they could contribute to. Because I was like, I had one that was just like update the dependencies, like just go into the package.json and bump the number, a couple up. And that's Anita, what he says, that this is kind of like a learning experience. And I know that both me and Lucia have like teaching experience, and that's a big thing with, I think, Hacktoberfest is getting people involved who maybe want to do open source, but haven't necessarily known the best way. And I'm also really involved with this project called Open Sauce, which is also all about getting, contributors into open source. So be curious if anyone wants to speak a little more about their specific issue that they handled in terms of why they picked that issue and then how they approached it and then what their solution was. And this is an open floor to anyone who wants to go.
So I'll go ahead. So kind of circling back to what I said previously, I was looking for issues that I could do well in a reasonable amount of time. And I saw that there was a need for some styling on the homepage. And also kind of took a saying from a undergrad professor many years ago. You want to make sure you answer the question, read and understand what the maintainers are wanting and not go, because with styling, you can really just start going in different directions, but you want to make sure you're giving the maintainer what they're asking for. And so what I did with that, it was stated, remove the bullet points on the list from the data. It was a very primitive homepage. So what I did is like, okay, well, I'll address that the bullets in the card that I had added to the data in the rocket information link. But I also wanted to stick with as much of the StepZen themes as I could. So the colors that I chose were actually from the StepZen website. I just went to the dev tools and got the colors. That way I'm not just finding colors out of left field that make no sense, to try to go with the theme. And also, again, with styling, because it, you do have a little bit of guidelines, but people can think one thing, somebody's thinking something entirely different. So I, sent a screenshot in to just kind of make sure I was on the same page. We're just kind of thinking this in the same way. And Lucia had said she had liked it. I actually had gotten a screenshot of my other screen that had the cat on it, so the cat did not go into the backdrop.
I was
on that
wondering
one.
about that. Yeah,
So
but no, I really did
no.
appreciate the screenshot and the thought that you put into it.
So I figured with that, it's like, okay, if we're not going in the right direction, I can get some feedback and address those things there. But it's pretty straightforward on that. I resolved a little merge conflict. I think the package lock before it was final. That was like the first merge conflict I've dealt with. It wasn't my own. So I was very careful to make sure that I did it right, didn't mess anything up and that kind of thing. But I'll echo what Pete said as well. The documentation, the READMEs, the contributing guides were very well thought out. They were laid out, clean, organized code that made a job as a contributor easier, especially for a newbie. But I think if I was a seasoned expert, I'd also appreciate that as well. There's less guesswork. You're laying it out like, this is what we want. This is what we want you to do. And I think it just makes it a great, also an efficient experience for everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, the merge conflicts that you ran into was a learning experience for me as well as a maintainer. Next time, I think I will either use NPM or Yarn, and then I'll stick with it and make sure everybody knows about that in the documentation, so we don't end up with those types of conflicts again.
And then, of course, with the query docs, I've been kind of going through that. Google's my friend of looking up, making sure I know what things mean. And I'm hoping, again, to get the PR opened or have a discussion beforehand just to make sure, again, that's about as accurate as it is supposed to be and concise and of course correct. So that's kind of my approach with the next StepZen issue that I'm working on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Either Pete or Anita, you want to speak a little more about your specific issue that you worked on? Pete, I know you did too, so you can talk about either or both.
Yeah, sure. I'll go just because there's a nice segue of, I think, from what Rebecca mentioned about the documentation and kind of like the efficiency. So one of on the next repo, I was looking into in updating to use the environment variable file. So in the documentation, it talks about when you set up the command line interface, getting your API key and the endpoint. And so basically, I just kind of went through those steps and then looked at the existing code. And there's like some small minor improvements where we could actually put that in an environment file that React reads from by default. So there's not as much guesswork that there previously would have had to been some manual updates on the contributors part in multiple places where I try to just put it in a singular place in the environment file. It for new devs, I think especially environment files, where it's coming from sometimes is not always apparent. It is in the docs, and like once I think you've seen it enough times, the patterns kind of suss itself out. But any kind of just like boilerplate like that you can kind of streamline, I'm a big fan of. So that was the one in Nuxt. So just reading
before you go on from there, like
sure.
this was like such a great issue for you to do, and especially this is the first one that got. And I'm so glad it was, because this is a project that the reason why I kind of picked it for Hacktoberfest is because I had kind of worked on it a little bit like many months ago, and then kind of just like left it like half finished. And there's like certain things that most of our samples would always have, which is like an environment file already set up with a sample environment file, and that would already be connected to the front end app and all that kind of stuff. So that wasn't actually done at all. And as you say, that makes it a lot more challenging to work with one of these projects. You have to actually go into the code, figure out where your environment variables need to go and put them in manually, versus having them already placed there. So you just have to update your environment file and then put them in. So I really appreciate that. Like out of all the issues you picked, like what probably was the best and most important one to like do first. So it was a lot of like good foresight on your part.
Great. Yeah, happy to help there. And then for the SpaceX one, I just did using Jest. I added a unit test to verify essentially that the component renders as expected. So there's a couple of different states of the component when it's fetching data. So I try to enumerate all of those different steps, and Jest has a nice feature called snapshot testing. And so what that allows you to do is essentially just let the framework serialize the DOM essentially into like kind of a JSON format. It's checked into the code, so it can actually be cached, which is nice for performance reasons. But I don't want to get too in the weeds. But essentially, it just allows people to have more confidence when they make a change to a component to know that either their change didn't result in unexpected behavior, or sometimes when you make a change, that should indicate that the component needs to get updated, and that would result in a test failure. So I'm a big proponent of unit testing, integration testing, everything in between. And so I just picked this one just because it was kind of it was available and it was something that was in my wheelhouse. So and I enjoy an improvement that maybe could go along with it is like wiring your repo up to like a GitHub action to run the tests on PR opens and things of that nature, just so what I mentioned before about people having confidence in their changes, that could provide a good window. It does add a little complexity if people aren't used to the tooling, because it is a new thing on top of, you know, React or Node or whatever the individual contributor is learning at the time. So it is definitely more of a nice to have, but more and more projects have this type of continuous integration and deployment type of workflow via GitHub Actions or some other service provider. And so I think it's a good, like, nice little gentle way or introduction into unit testing.
Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion with the GitHub Actions, especially for an open source repository. So
Yeah, definitely. And I find that anyone who's looking to get involved in any project, writing tests is almost always going to be a thing that needs to be done, and that is like very much appreciated. So it's definitely a good thing to hop on if you have the knowledge of how to write tests and how to do them well, and the benefit of having those compounds so quickly, because as you say, can help for other people who are trying to contribute and want to make sure that their contributions are not breaking something and causing regressions and things like that. Awesome. And then Anita, did you want to say anything else about your contributions? That you actually have an open one right now that I still need to merge for you as well. So you've gotten kind of a couple in there.
Yeah, so I contributed mostly to the Nuxt repo, mostly because I want to use Nuxt on a future project, but I hadn't had the time to like sit and learn it. So I thought, let me just jump in both feet and see where I land. And the first issue that I took was adding a global CSS property to the Nuxt configuration file. And I picked that first because it's CSS and I like CSS. And also, when I read the issue, I thought, okay, well, then whatever happens in this global CSS will trickle down to every part of the project. And I had also just learned about design systems. So I was like, my brain was like, I should do it here because it kind of makes sense in this context. So yeah, that's why I picked that issue. And I ended up making a very small design system, nothing too fancy, just like a couple of colors and a couple of spacing design tokens, like one layout. I didn't know what the project was going to look like after everyone had contributed. So I kind of did as general as possible in hopes that, you know, if anyone wants to make the mountains in a grid or make it flexbox, whatever, but they had the ability and the flexibility to change whatever they wanted. Yeah, that's for that one. And Anthony, you posted my PR on the front end horse server, and Mike, who has that design system thing going on, the cool CSS, he was like, wow. And I was like, oh no, Senpai has noticed me.
No, that's so cool. And this is one of the reasons why I love these Discord communities, because you were referencing work from someone else in the front end horse Discord. And I was like, oh, wait, I know this guy. I've heard him talk about design systems also. And so I am not a CSS whiz by any stretch of the imagination. So I very much appreciate the foresight you put into how do you not just like add styling, but add styling in a way that's going to set up the project for the long term, because CSS in general is like notorious for being incredibly hard to maintain and deal with. And this whole like design system thing is basically like creating reusable styles and colors and things that you can like use kind of, so it's more like creating like utility functions almost. And I think that's kind of the idea there. So like what exactly were your thoughts when you're thinking of like how to make a design system? You think about like sizing of fonts, you have colors, like what exactly do you think about when you create these design tokens?
So when I was learning about design system, I was learning a particular framework that Mike had made for himself called Cool CSS, and it's broken down into components, utility to be the U, utility, and layout. So he talks about creating design tokens for all of your design choices, like your font sizing, your colors, those kinds of things. And then you use utilities for things that you wouldn't want to put in a component. Like you don't want to add margins inside of a component. You kind of want your margins to exist outside of a component, or you might want to do like, okay, I can't think of another one at the top of my head. That's a good enough example. But then there's also layout that he separates from everything else. So for me, my layout utility classes were my grid classes. So yeah, that's the approach I followed when making that design system.
Awesome. Very cool. Does anyone else have any kind of comments about things they would have liked to see, or like kind of improvements you think we could make to the whole kind of Hacktoberfest process? If not, we did everything perfect.
You guys did you did everything perfect. I think I wish more people could have seen this as the project to hop into if they were still learning, or as their starting point, because I thought everything was explained very well and very welcoming. Even doing this, welcoming me, and I'm from another continent, but I feel as part of your community now.
That's awesome. I do want to say, I think there was a large part of this due to two things. One, to Anthony's experience probably in open source with Redwood. And then also I had some virtual coffee guidelines to follow as far as making welcoming and easy to contribute to repositories. And those are both supremely helpful to us as maintainers. So yeah, we were happy that we accomplished our goal in making it a seamless contributing experience, especially for first-time Hacktoberfest participants.
Awesome. Well, I think me and Lucia wanted to just real quick kind of go through what we still have open for anyone who may be watching or interested in contributing with the week we still have left. So you're all welcome to stay on, hang out, or you can hop off if you want. Really appreciate you all sharing your experience, and we're glad that it was a positive experience for you, because I know me and Lucia are huge proponents of open source and have gotten so much value ourselves. So we always want to pay it forward and make sure that these are welcoming and accessible to anyone of any experience and background. Cool. Did you want to show your repo first, Lucy, or do you want me to?
Sure. I've got my issues tab here. Let me just figure out how to switch the screen. Oh, right. I have to share screen. I do this like just infrequently enough to forget every time how to share a tab. Okay, there we go though. So here are the issues that we have. They're still open. As you can see, many of them are assigned, and I've got to remove the available label off of them. One of them is, so let's just go through the open ones. We've got create a page to fetch launches by launch year still available. We've got connect the REST API via StepZen. That one I'm thinking of breaking up into smaller issues as well, because we've got that's connecting to an entire other API. So there's a lot of context there to maybe document. If you're wanting to jump in, let's see, they're still adding documentation to the schema types. I think queries is claimed and scalars is already done. But if you're new to GraphQL, this would probably be a good one to contribute to. And then we've also got use React Router to create links to pages with information on each launch. So in a lot of React apps, what I see is in the main app, you have kind of rendering all of the pages so that it routes to each different one. And as we add these pages, we're going to want to have an element like that to make sure that we're organizing them correctly and that we're rendering them all through one component. So certainly, though, we can, you guys can still contribute after October is over if you'd like. We'd be happy to keep this repository open.
Yeah, totally. All the samples are always open to contribution, whether they're these ones or just we have a ton of different StepZen samples using all sorts of different APIs and front-end technology. And so this was, I think, a good way of kind of putting ourselves out there as like, hey, we are doing open source things. We have open source repos. We're looking for contributions. So don't think that just because Hacktoberfest is over, it means we're not still looking for contributions. I will go ahead and share my screen. So there's not a ton open still, and a lot of these are already claimed by a couple people. But if you are looking to do something, I would recommend just kind of popping in and seeing like, hey, is this still taken, or is this open? Because some people may have kind of fallen off. We have create a serverless function for the StepZen keys. This one really could probably be broken up into a couple issues, because creating the function itself and then actually like protecting the key and then actually calling it to do the query, those are all kind of separate things. So if you're interested in this, let me know and I can kind of break this up into a couple issues. And then we got tests. There's always more tests that need to be written. So even if this one's already claimed, you can write different tests that test kind of different functionality. This is the one that Anita actually has a PR in already that I'll be checking in. And then we've got auditing the front end for accessibility. That's another one that's kind of like testing where it's very open-ended. There's lots of different things that can go into accessibility audits. And then kind of fleshing out the actual GraphQL schema itself. So these are the ones we've got open right now. And if you're interested, and these are all taken, I could open some new ones as well. So just let us know, and we're happy to get some stuff going for you. Awesome. Does anyone else have anything they kind of want to say before we start closing it out here? And thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you hopping on and sharing your experience. And we'll almost certainly be doing this next October as well. And then, as I just said, we're always looking for contributions. So even if it's not Hacktoberfest, we're happy to accept PRs and help guide you through the process of contributing.
Yeah. And if you haven't sent in a request for stickers yet, there's the link. We appreciate you and your contributions, and we'd love to send some swag over.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Pete. All right, and with that, we will call it quits. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you next Friday.